live.
Good evening, and thanks for attending. This is our virtual community engagement for the proposed agreement for the Birkett Lane development. We had 2 in-persons in July, so this is just the follow-up for virtual. So I will go to the first slide. Apologies, it seems to have frozen. Never mind. All right, we will start with introductions. My name is Taylor Hill. I'm the Assistant Director at Lands and Resource Department for Six Nations, the Grand River Elected Council.
Good evening. I'm Peter Graham, Consultation Supervisor for Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council.
Good evening, Lauren Jones. I am the manager of the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office and work with the CAP team.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lonnie Bomberry, and I'm the Director of Lands and Resource Department for Six Nations Council.
Good evening, everyone. Don Russell. I am the Consultation Administrative Assistant.
Lois, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lois Bunbury, and I'm the hospice project lead for the community hospice that's being built.
Okay, so this is just a map of the proposed development. So there is 4 developers involved: Multany Homes, Kingwood, Live Homes, and Cache Homes. So they're divided out in their sections, but they're jointly doing it together. So for the infrastructure and whatnot, it'll be jointly together, but each one adds up to have the total unit count. So the basic information is there's approximately 100 acres of land between the 4 developers, which I mentioned were Cache Homes, Kingwood Homes, Live Communities, and Multany Homes. There is approximately 1,276 units of residential housing. Of course, this is market dependent, so depending on the market conditions when the construction starts will determine if the units slightly increase or decrease. And as you might have noticed in the map, the development will also occur over several phases. These are also dependent on the market condition. So there was archaeology was completed on the site. So there were archaeology monitors on site from Six Nations of the Grand River, Mississauga's the Credit First Nation, and the Haudenosaunee Development Institute. There is one site that is avoided and protected. So that site is currently been transferred over to the city of Brantford, so it's no longer owned by the developers. In that site, there was pottery, lithics, mainly, and some glass was also found. Lauren, would you like to discuss the natural environment now, please?
Yeah, I can do that. So, as I said, Lauren Jones, manager of the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office. I'm going to be going through the environmental aspects, concerns, and mitigations which we push for at the Wildlife Office. I have amalgamated all of the environmental documents kind of into one speech. So if there is any questions about a particular property, please let me know. I'll do my best to follow up. So starting with birds, the proponents assessed this using breeding bird surveys. These took place in 2018 and 2021 in June. There were 33 species recorded, approximately, give or take, between the 2 sites. Particular species of interest that I observed in these documents included eastern wood pewee and barn swallows. Both of these species are a special concern. The rest of the species observed were generally considered general species that you find pretty much everywhere, things like American robins, mourning doves, and so on. We did get a specific question regarding nesting, and I'm actually really happy we got that question, because on one site, on one breeding bird survey, eastern wood pewee was confirmed to be breeding, but in the other one, they were not. This is actually one of the reasons for one of our asks, which was to complete an additional breeding bird survey to confirm one way or the other. No nesting sites were noted for barn swallows. In terms of other species that are not identified as species at risk, that information is typically not given to us in environmental documents. Again, if there are particular species that I should be asking about, please let us know. That is definitely helpful to us. For bats, this is another taxon that we typically make a lot of comments about. Now, in general, the proponents did not put in the amount of effort that we particularly like to see. Part of this is because of the changes in the species at risk statuses of bats in Ontario. However, we did convince the proponents to follow up and do additional studies and additional mitigation for potential impacts to bats on the area. For plants, the proponents completed a thing called ecological land classification. Essentially, you just go on site and you just try to identify every plant that you see. This occurred in March and June. A total of between 54 and 59 species were found within the properties. Some of the highlights I noted were black walnut, hackberry, virgin bower, curly dock, riverside grape, alternate leaf dogwood, chokecherry, red baneberry, and Ohio buckeye. The majority of trees that were found on these properties are quite small, with the exception of a hedgerow, particularly within the Birkett property. There are also quite a few noted invasives and non-native plants observed, approximately 50% of the plants in total. So these included things like Siberian elm, Norway maple, garlic mustard, tree of heaven, lily of the valley. We call these non-natives or invasive species because they actually have the potential to severely impact the survivability of native plants. So we're typically not too concerned when a ecosystem is overrun by these types of species. There are no dedicated studies that took place for mammals. Again, this is typically not okay with us. So I did follow up on some citizen science sources, which indicated presence of white-tailed deer, coyote, striped skunk, and possum, which are all likely within the project area. Same with insects and bugs, no dedicated studies. However, citizen science gave me a hit for monarch and a cecropia moth. In terms of stormwater facilities will be added to include a dry and a wet pond. This is typically what we like to see in the office. It just allows for water to be infiltrated at the site where it drops, and that tends to be better in terms of quality and quantity control. Anything that does pass onto the wet pond and goes into the municipal system will eventually end up into the Grand River because of that municipal system connection that already exists. Onto the environmental site assessments. So environmental site assessments typically look at sources of potential contamination, either currently or historically. In particular, the Birkett site had a history of some farming and lumber operations, which means that soil would have to be cleaned up prior to putting housing on the property. The proponent is doing this. As a result of like some old farming activities, you also have the potential for like burning garbage, lead paint, things like that. So some of the things that the proponents are doing in response to Wildlife Office requests include replanting of milkweed, which is an obligate host plant for monarch. Vegetation removals are taking place outside of the breeding bird window. This is pretty standard. In total, 887 trees in total will be removed. I believe proponents have agreed to the 10-to-1 tree replacement ratio that we typically request. For your knowledge, in this area and many other areas, we typically only see 3-to-1 naturally. As I mentioned, both the proponents are undertaking additional bird and bat surveys. These were completed in June 2026. However, we are still awaiting the results of that. Red baneberry is a slightly rarer plant that is being transplanted. In cases where they can't find a place to plant trees, they are considering a cash in lieu option, which again is a process that we facilitate. And they have committed to using Guyana for tree planting as well. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Lauren. Before I move on from the map, I know previous engagements, there's a couple questions about where it is. I hope the map helps, but as you can see, at the bottom is Birkett Lane, and then you see the one road, I'll put my, right, is Erie, and then up here is where the Grand Erie District School Board buildings are, and then it is behind. So I hope that helps locate people a little bit better. Okay, so the proposed agreement is Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council will receive approximately 5.1 million for this development. And the members attending these community engagement meetings will suggest the use of the money. So that's what we really want to emphasize here. If this agreement was to be accepted, where would you like this money directed to? The next slide will give some suggestions, but we are always open to if another one is more highly needed, and there's a lot of support for that one. Also, like this one and all our other ones, we do include a clause or an ask for to collaborate work with great so Grand River Employment and Training on employment, contracting, and apprenticeship opportunities. So I'll pause here for a sec. I know one of the questions before was how did the 5.1 million come up? So it equals out to about 4,000 a unit. A unit being whether that is a single family home or a townhouse or something in between. They're all considered units. So as I said on the previous page, had the total count of units, and that's how it is. Why only that? Well, that was the highest that the developers would agree to go to. So here's some potential community benefits that we have. This is were collected from over the last decade. There's been numerous surveys on what are the needs in the community, not just through this department, but other departments. And the top ones have been housing, transportation, water, and then recently, as everyone knows, the long-term care facility is no longer habitable, the long-term care facility, and also the Six Nations of the Grand River Hospice. So the consultation accommodation process team, which includes the members I were introduced in the beginning, and is a part of the Lands and Resources Department, which is a part of the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council. Suggest directing the money to the Six Nations, the Grand River Hospice. So I will now turn over to Lois, where she will kind of go over the hospice and the need for the money and whatnot.
Okay, thanks, Taylor. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. I too was involved in the other two engagement sessions that were in person at the community hall. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about the hospice that's forthcoming in the community. So it's going to be at just under 12,000 square feet. It's going to be a 5-bed hospice. So we're going to have 5 beds within the hospice itself. And it's going to be a home-like environment when you think of hospice care in the community. So some of this, I guess, engagement for the hospice and the need within the community for hospice came about way back in 2012 as a collaboration with Lake Kid on a research project. So we did the engagement session way back then, and that's what come out of that when you think of palliative care and hospice care within the community. So that the hospice now is coming to fruition in 2026. So it's taken that long when you think of the needs within the community way back in 2012. The project is covered, of course, by the Ontario Health or Ministry of Health. Some of you might know it as. And of course, Six Nations Elected Council is kicking in some as well when you think of capital costs as opposed to operational costs. We are still fundraising for the capital portion as well, just to help offset some of the capital, I guess the capital expenditures as well within that. As part of the hospices in Ontario, in all the hospices in Ontario, part of that is fundraising. So we're going to always have to continually fundraise for various parts of the hospice operations. When you think of operations, that would include like programs and services. So if we're running a grief and bereavement group per se, some of those will be extra funds, or if the clients and families want different modalities to help them with their grief. When you think of modalities of health, whether it be culturally, Western, or whatever type of modality that they would need to get through grief, um, or to help their family member in comfort in the end stage of life, as well. So those are just some of the things when you think of operations, that are outside, I guess, of the funding pot, um, per se. Volunteers is another big portion. So a lot of the programming will occur through volunteers or within collaboration within, already various programs under Wellbeing Department, and within the community. So the big pieces of the hospice will be, of course, fundraising and volunteers. So that door is always open for the volunteers, um, whether it be in home or within the hospice for end of life care. What else came up? So like even cultural resources, cultural medicines, as well as if the clients and families require cultural medicines, or traditional medicines in end of life, or sometimes they just need the grief tea to help as well, within that. Legacy work, when we talk about legacy work for the volunteers, so that would be like, building a board, or um, some people cut up their loved ones' clothes and make a, like a blanket, or they take pictures. They do videos as well. So those are some of the things when I refer to legacy work. So those are some of the outside activities that, um, we will be fundraising for, and that this money will go towards, um, help cover the cost of some of those things, right down to like, blanket warmers, those types of things. If we need extra blanket warmers within the hospice, if we need extra food, within the hospice as well. So some of those other pieces outside of the, funding pot that's there. I always think of gardening as well. So if we want to expand a garden, those are extra costs outside of that that will be ongoing fundraising for, as well. So, I hope that gives you a little bit, better understanding of when you think of, um, I guess, costing or fundraising. So Ministry of or the Ontario Health is providing some of the funding. Six Nations Elected Council is providing some of the funding, but um, it's going to be an ongoing thing within the hospice and within the community, to meet those needs annually as well. You can direct any questions to me if you need any more information. Um, you can direct it to Taylor, and she can get the information to me, as well. We're going to have pamphlets coming out shortly for volunteer, or go on the Wellbeing website, and you can get, all the information off of there. So thank you for your time.
Hey, Laura, just one question. Is there a timeline for construction yet, or updated, I guess?
Right now, we're waiting on, the access road, so we can't get anything going. So we're hoping end of September, October, we'll get the access road happening, so the rest of it can continue on after the access road. And when I say access road, everybody probably has seen the sign out front on Fourth Line, just past the police station. So that's going to be our access road to go around and back to where the hospice is going to be, in the field and beside I guess, the west side of the police station, um, or east, no, west side of the police station. So yeah, so we're hoping end of September, early October. We're hoping.
Thanks, Lois.
Okay, thanks.
So I just want to reiterate what I said. Nothing has been decided. The hospice is just a suggestion. Any other needs can be considered and will be considered. I also say I know they had a question about why we're suggesting hospice, and from previous community engagements, there was always the ask or the comment about having something tangible. So the money is directed to, so not something way in the future that you won't see. So as Lois nicely explained, they're waiting on the access road, but the construction is more imminent, and so that's why. And as Lois also detailed the needs. One of the other questions that we had, why is there no agreement? In 2025, and I guess maybe 2024, we at previous community engagements, we got the comment about not having agreement, that they wanted the community engagement to happen before an agreement. So this time there is no agreement yet, or maybe never, depending on how it goes. So that's why there's no agreement presented. There's just the main points that would form an agreement if it goes forward. I know there's also another question brought up in both of the last two in-persons, and that was what about the land, and about the like our interest in the land. So Lonnie, I don't know if you want to touch on that briefly.
Yes, I can touch on that. This area that these houses are being built is what we call, it's historically been called the Eagle's Nest Track. And the Eagle's Nest Track is one of the three other tracks in and around Brantford that where there's no surrender for them. They've never been officially surrendered by Six Nations to the Crown, and they sit in limbo as kind of, well, what is the status of that if they're not surrendered? So the lands are specifically mentioned in our lawsuit against Canada and Ontario, which lawsuit has a trial starting on October 5th of this year for breach of fiduciary duty and trust accounting. And trust accounting means accounting for the land that you got, and it's been in your possession since the 1800s. And how did you get it? And lawfully, and if you didn't, then you have to account for it. So that is part of the lawsuit. Now we're getting, if we do enter into any sort of arrangement with these developers, it'll be what we can best be described as consultation and accommodation agreement. That means it'll be specifically spelled out in any agreement that we are not giving up any interest in the land, nor are we selling any land. This is strictly an accommodation. We can still maintain our right to be financially compensated for it from the Crowns, both Canada and Ontario, which is part of our lawsuit. So we're not giving up that interest in the lands. There are a lot of developments that are going on in Brantford now in which no such arrangements have been made or have been contemplated being made. But on this one, because it's a new development, it's in the Eagle's Nest track, and there is that duty to consult and then the duty to accommodate. We're looking for the consultation from the developers, not from the Crown. That's who really owes the duty to accommodate, which in this case would be the provincial Crown, the Ontario Crown. But having accommodation from the developers as I said, doesn't mean that we're giving up our interest in the land or we're selling it. We're still continuing to maintain that duty to be compensated for the loss of the land from the Crowns, both from Canada and from Ontario.
Thanks, Lonnie. So the page we're on, so there was a survey feedback. So it was pretty much yes, no, and if no, why not? And then other comments and features. So if you would like a copy, you can drop by the office or email. And then the email is on here, so it's lrcs@sixnations.ca. The Lands and Resources Department, which is located at 2498 Chiefswood Road. So it's the what used to be known as the old tourism building. There is a sign on the door as you walk through, which now Six Nations group to it. So before we open the Q&A, there was just some previous questions submitted on the sheet. So I will go through those first and then open it up to any new questions. So I think, I don't know, I can't remember, Lauren, did you touch on if this area had previous environmental surveys done?
Typically, they will complete environmental surveys in response to somebody wanting to develop in the area. So I mentioned kind of briefly, there is citizen science records, which have been accessed by me when I was researching this. And that would be pretty much the extent of it.
Excellent, thanks, Lauren. Lonnie, this question might be for you. It said, how did the Ontario Realty Corp take and sell what isn't theirs to give? So I think they're asking, how did the title become in the hands of the developers?
What we understand that, as I said, this land was never surrendered, so the Crown in the 1800s just assumed control over it once they got the Six Nations people to predominantly locate where they are now, and told the chiefs at a time that they would sell any lands that they vacated and for their benefit. So that was how it was done. And you have to remember back in the 1800s, what happened was uh, the Crown encouraged squatters to come onto the Holman track, and uh, and there were a lot of them, and they surrounded the Six Nations people, and it wasn't a very comfortable situation. So in the end, ended up leaving where we had been previously living and consolidating where we are now, and so that land became essentially vacant, and then from there the Crown, without any, as I said, without a lawful surrender, patented the land and sold it off to settlers and non-indigenous newcomers, and so the land was lost, although that was never legally and lawfully taken from us, and which is part of the court case. So that's been patented now since almost 200 years in the Crown's landholding system. Then it was the government of Upper Canada, which later became the province of Ontario.
Thanks, Lonnie. And there was also a question about, is this a lease? So no, the units in the development would be sold to the individuals that purchased them. I know one of the questions last time was what stage is this development at? So they had previously submitted a development application to the city of Brantford. Through comments from the city, they have revised the application, and they were resubmitting and hoping to get that in before elections. Just a reminder, the municipal elections, which includes the city of Brantford, is on October 26th. So that was planned. Also, Lauren had mentioned there was environmental cleanup. So the phase one of the environmental cleanup has happened. There was cement in a corner. Phase two is still to happen. But as Lauren said, they are abiding by like breeding bird windows and whatnot. So that has to happen after that. I see there's a kind of comment about the old tourism building. I believe the move was over in 2002 with when the Six Nations Development Corporation was still called that and not the Six Nations Group. And then the tourism was still underneath Six Nations Group. Now they're not now under Six Nations, the Grand River Elected Council. All right, Peter. First question after that is, why is Six Nations not demanding an ongoing payment from these developments? Much like taxes, at least the way it's not just a one-time payment.
Yes, I think that would be a more agreeable form of accommodation, and historically, the Six Nations community has generally been partial to agreements that will have regular annual payments that can be relied on. In this case, we weren't able to get the developers over that 5.1 million amount, which is crucial. So we really didn't see a viable path to doing that, because it would just be, unfortunately, that $5.1 million just divided up into little increments. So we did think it was better to take a lump sum, since any annual payment would be very small. And that also, the one advantage, again, it would be restricted to that sum, having it as a lump sum, is that we're able to put it towards, depending on what the community feedback says. So whether it's hospice, whether it's housing. Whereas if it was just a much smaller amount, dribs and drabs, it would be harder for the community to see a concrete benefit from it.
Thanks, Peter. I also mentioned, during our litigation update last time, and I always, one of the solutions we are looking forward if we ever go to negotiation, what would be ongoing payments throughout the entire Haldeman track. So the next question, sorry, hold. So then the next question is about who the treaties were made with. So I don't know, Lonnie, you want to touch on about the Haldeman Treaty and its initial existence in 1784?
Yes, our research indicates that the Haldeman Proclamation was made pursuant to what we call the Haldeman Treaty. Now, this was a fulfillment of a promise that was made to Six Nations before the American War of Independence broke out. That if you joined us as allies in our fight against the Americans, you would be no worse off than if you had not. So they persuaded the Six Nations, majority of the Six Nations, not all of them did. There was a few tribes that fought for the Americans to join in the battle against the Americans, which lasted from 1776 until 1783. So, and then the end result was that it was Great Britain made peace with Americans and without any consultation with Six Nations, gave our homelands in New York State to the Americans. And so Six Nations was quite uh, unhappy about that and threatened to attack the British. And so they had to then make accommodations for the land here in what's now southern Ontario. So that was done. We say it was a treaty in a sense that the Haldeman Proclamation fulfills a promise made. It was a promise made to the Mohawks and others of Six Nations that they would be granted this land that they and their prosperity would enjoy forever. So there isn't actually any treaty that was made with the chiefs at the time. It was simply a proclamation on an understanding that that the Six Nations, the Mohawks and other Six Nations, would enjoy the lands that were to be given to the Six Nations, and that uh, they would be welcome to come here and settle pursuant to that treaty promise on the lands. But there is no actual uh, treaty to speak of as when you think of you signed between two more or less equal partners. This was not done. It was simply a proclamation, but it was a treaty in the sense that to fulfill the promises that were made to the Six Nations before the American War of Independence broke out. So, in a sense, that is what we call a treaty. The other treaties that that we rely on in this area is the Nanfan Treaty of 1701, and that was made. And then the Haldeman Proclamation lands are completely within the Nanfan Treaty area. Now that treaty was made between the British and the Five Nations at the time, and it was actually a signed agreement, not unlike the Haldeman Proclamation. So it actually exists. We have copies of the original Nanfan Treaty, and so it does what we would understand to be a treaty between two independent parties making promises to each other. So that's sort of a slight difference between the Haldeman Treaty and the Nanfan Treaty is.
So the next one you kind of touched on, Lonnie, was like, it was like, I'm curious as how to act a word become a treaty. So I think what Lonnie was saying, the Haldeman Treaty, the Haldeman Proclamation was to fulfill the commitment after the war. It wasn't the actual start of the war. Um, I mean, so it was just to fulfill the promise that had been there before the war. There's just a comment about how the heredity should be making these decisions. I'll just leave that as is, as the comment it is. Um, I also just say I did forget to mention the archaeology session, as I know this came out in the last two sessions, but the developers had been in will would continue to be in communication with the survivor secretariat if any construction was to go forward. I'll just further mention that the if comments and questions can still be submitted after today's live stream. Um, as as you can see on the slide right now, there is the address. The phone number and the email address. I meant to say where those can be submitted. Um, and I know there's been some comments for having it be able online. It's currently in the works. Um, hopefully in the near future, where they can be submitted directly through online. Um, okay, so I think this is a bit of a two-part question, so I'll start with the first. So, is the lawsuit starts in October this year? Yes, it starts in the first phase. So the trial was bifurcated, which means it was split into two. So the liability phase, and then there's the damages phase. So the liability phase does start on October 5th, 2026. That is a Monday, and it's approximately a few years for that phase. And then I think the second part is um, why is Six Nations not developing the lands ourselves for future generations to benefit from and enjoy for years to come while the government drags their feet on any settlements? So I think, Peter, you want to take that?
Yes, and unfortunately, as Lonnie explained, the land had been stolen some time ago, and compensation never provided. So it's just not possible to develop the land directly.
Okay. Was there a community assessment vote / meeting? So there's has been two in-person meetings. One was on Thursday, July 30th, and the other one was on Monday, July 7th. Sorry, yes, I've been corrected. Monday, July 20th. And and then, as I said, it's still open after today as well to submit any comments. There's also another question, but why is this a donation payment and not a purchase agreement? So we're not actually purchasing anything from them, but I will comment on. So you might have seen previous wording donation. So basically, the hospice, as Lois was mentioning, it runs on donations. So they have set up a fund to collect those donations. So if the money was decided to be directed to that, it would be going into the donation funds. So in a sense, to be put into the donation fund. So that's why it was being called the donation. Um, there. So there's a question about the whereabouts of the elected chief and the councillors. I just ask you to direct that to them. I know their emails and phone numbers are available on the latest political newsletter that went out and on the website. Okay, the next question is, how many meetings did the government say you needed? The government didn't say we needed any, but there is a community engagement protocol that went through a 9-month engagement in 2024. It is on the Six Nations Future. That was had a community working group. Why not lease the land?
If I'm understanding correctly, are you talking about like the proponent paying lease payments? I mean, the difficulty is, of course, if this was recognized ownership of Six Nations land, nothing like this would be occurring. And unfortunately, the government believes that it's the developers and not Six Nations that own the land. So it's difficult to force a kind of lease arrangement.
Um, if you say the land was stolen some time ago, why isn't council fighting for some land? So I know Lonnie mentioned, but I'll just reiterate, all of the land in the Haldeman tract is included in the litigation. So this part is inside the Haldeman tract, so it would be included in the litigation, which is a breach of fiduciary duty and accounting for everything that happened between the land and the money along the Haldeman tract. There is a question after the last one I just said, and it has some great feedback that will be included in any the report that goes to council. But I will just be reading out questions. Also, yes, I do have a speech impediment. I did actually go to speech therapy in earlier years for stuttering. My apologies. There is sort of a comment about taking to court, so so that would be usually the Ontario Land Tribunal. But I believe, Peter, what's the percentage it sides with the developer?
Yeah, studies have found that the Ontario Lands Tribunal sides with developers at least 90% of the time. The appointees are all via the government, and generally they put a rubber stamp on what the government wants.
Peter, I think you did actually explain this the last two. Would you like to kind of go into the definition of third party?
Yes, third party typically, we'll mention that, in relation to land. It's just, initially it would have been Six Nations land. Depending on the situation, it's always stolen at least with the acquiescence, if not active participation of the government, as well as, as settlers. Consequently, almost all properties have changed hands many times, and so we refer to those subsequent land transactions as involving third parties versus Six Nations itself or the initial group or individual who took the land.
There's a comment about if the court says it's developer's land, they must be right. Question mark. then right? No, that's also one of the reasons why we started the Haldeman track litigation. As I said, there was litigation update last week. There was some documents on that will be available too. There'll also be an updated booklet. You might know it is called the Global Solutions, currently on the website as is, but there'll be an updated one that's fully focused on the litigation. I do see the comments, but where is the elected chief and council? We will definitely pass on the feedback that you would like them to attend. But as there is, but is there, they are obviously not here, but yes, that feedback will be passed along to them um, for them to consider. Lonnie, I think this question is: can these monies be turned around and said to be acknowledged payment when the court eventually gets around to solving land claims?
No, these lands will not be considered in the big judgment against the crowns that we're seeking. This is the law of consultation and accommodation is that you must accommodate the nations that are making the claim, irrespective of whether they get a settlement or not. That this will not play into that at all. This is simply like almost like a side agreement, a side benefit agreement, independent of any of the actions against Canada and Ontario. So it is rather unique, the law of consultation accommodation. Most people don't properly understand it. It means that the First Nations has a duty to be accommodated, and it's independent of any of their actual claims to the land or to the rights to the proceeds from the lands. So so it is unique in that sense of, as I said at the beginning, we aren't giving up anything in accepting this accommodation agreement. It will not prejudice in any way in our court case against Canada and Ontario.
Peter, there's a question about sort of how much the development's going to make. Like,
Yes, we don't know, exactly what the developers' internal predictions are. They hold that data really close to their chest. But we know with the Ballantree development, they were looking at around $100 million profit at current market conditions. And I believe that was closer to around 750 units. So if we were to guess, I think something around the area of $150 million in profit wouldn't be out of the question.
Lonnie, just because I wasn't here then, there's a question about the previous deal or MOU with Steve Charest, and if we have a copy or if we were, I guess, involved too as well.
No, we weren't involved with that deal. That was strictly a deal that was made between Steve Charest and the Mohawk workers. It didn't involve the elected council. Uh, we don't know all the benefits they received, but we do know that one of the benefits they did receive was that uh, land was bought on Sixth Line, just across the border on the other side of the reserve, and that land was given to the Mohawk workers, or yeah, it was put in a number of people's names in trust. We don't know the details of that arrangement. That was strictly between Steve Charest and the Mohawk workers at the time.
I don't know if Peter will let me take this, but there's questions about are buyers informed that these lands are delist because there's no settlement for the land? So I guess that would be sort of a question for the whole Haldeman tract as well, and what buyers know before they're purchasing units or houses.
To the best of my understanding, there aren't buyers on the tract that are informed of that. Part of the reason is as previously discussed, that third party liability.
Um, I'll just mention again that any comments to that will all be put into the report verbatim once the comment period has ended. There's a question about where are the traditional chiefs and what is their input.
We do not know. We have not discussed it with the traditional chiefs.
There's a question about will the report be made available to the community?
The consultation and accommodation process team, us, basically, are recommending that council release a one-page summary that will clearly indicate where community preference was on this consultation. So yes, no, maybe, as well as some other basic information, and that will be subject to council approval.
Don, this might be a question for you, because I know you were trying to arrange that meeting. I believe this is. Have you talked to the actual Mohawk posterity and what process did you use to contact them? I think that that's referencing the Mohawk workers.
There have been efforts made to reach out. Securing contact information has been difficult in regards to being informed of a couple of people to contact. Going to their door, there was no answer. But would appreciate the information going forward.
Sorry, apparently he actually meant the Mohawk descendants. If you can just clarify a little bit more what you mean exactly about the by the Mohawk descendants, then we can attempt to answer that better. There's a question about when will it be discussed with the hereditary chief and what's the process?
Yeah, that process is up to the elected council. We're just employees of the council. We don't make those political decisions. So whenever that does happen, it'll probably happen somewhere down the road, more in relation to if there's any possibility that the Crowns want to sit down and negotiate an end to the lawsuit. So there might be an opportunity then for the two councils to meet and decide what's best in terms of selling the lawsuit and getting the maximum benefits that for all the Six Nations people.
Okay, the clarification came through, and it goes, the proclamation names the Mohawk and their posterity. The pledge of 1779 named the three Mohawk village the descendants of this people. Um,
Mohawks, of course, fall under the community engagement process. It is of course not Mohawk targeted. It's geared to all six nations. But if there is a certain approach or organization you're recommending we speak with, we would be very interested to hear any feedback on that.
there's a question about results of the survey. So as the period is still open, the results have not been calculated yet. Once the period ends, then they will be calculated and put into the report. Uh, okay, the other question is, how have you determined the party and interest and that Six Nations as a whole are the party to discuss with?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Is it how will we determine?
How have you determined the party and interest and that Six Nations as a whole are the party to discuss with?
I think we're having some difficulty understanding the question.
Uh, there's a question about why the hurry. So I guess maybe that's more of like a do to consult question, and like the developer's kind of timeline and how that kind of works. Peter.
Yes, that's right, Taylor. And unfortunately, the provincial government has just kept speeding up, timelines. Now they want a lot of these, cases developed, in 90 days. Sometimes 60. Which you can appreciate. It's very difficult to, understand the project, chase the developer down. A lot of real barriers. So unfortunately, times are compressed. We don't have as much time as there should be to be able to adequately engage and consider these projects. And it would be beneficial. I think Taylor was mentioning that they have, they're hoping for an approval in September. So we wanted to get the community engagement in place. Comments are still accepted up till September 8th before the city made that decision.
The clarification is what makes you certain that Six Nations holds any interest under the Haldeman Proclamation?
While we just looked at the Haldeman Proclamation, it says the Mohawks and others of the Six Nations. So uh, it was going toward that point where we're all grouped as one body together, including the Mohawks and others of the Six Nations. Uh, so that's how we determined that it's not exclusively the Mohawks, although the Mohawks are very important, but it's also others of the Six Nations who were included and who came here from the United States and settled on the Grand River lands uh, and various settlements along the Grand River. Uh, so, we as a CAP team and the Lands Resource Department are just employees of the elected council. The elected council has been in existence since 1924. It was later confirmed that they are the lawful government in the case of Isaac and Davies by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1977. There were a number of decisions after that dealing with whether they are the lawful authority of all of the Six Nations. And it was determined as recently as 2023, Justice Akparelli's decision on the Ontario Superior Court and involving our court case where where the HDI tried to intervene and take over the case from the elected council. And she says the judge there said no, it's the elected council has been recognized as a legal authority for the Six Nations people for a number of years now, and they were the proper representatives of Six Nations going forward. So we have all these judicial decisions in the favor of the elected council. So that's, as I said, that's what we rely on. That's how we understand that the elected council represents all of the Six Nations in the Grand River, based on past court decisions and an actual fact that they've been governing since 1924. That's the basis for that.
Um, do we not have the opportunity to say no? September is 2 weeks away. So yes, the engagement has been open since June, so that would be July, August, and then September. So yes, we've held 2 in-person sessions in July. So yes, all those responses have been collected and will be submitted in the final report to Six Nations, the Grand River Elected Council. There's another question about why haven't you held meetings with the hereditary chiefs? I want to say I know the elected council has reached out in the past to no response. And if they were to reach out again and that was successful, then of course we would help them in those meetings with any item they needed help with. There's a question about how will you contact all the members? I guess I'll briefly go over our advertisement efforts. So we do mail outs to everyone who has a registered mailbox on Six Nations of Canada Reserve. So that's through the Oswego Post Office, Hagersville, Scotland, Waterford, and Caledonia, because they all do deliver onto the reserve. It was posted in both newspapers, Turtle Island News and Two Road Times. It was also put on the website. The 2 in-persons are, of course, open to every single member, regardless of political affiliation. Then we have the virtual one for the comments. And I do believe the CEO did put it in her update on one of the general council meetings as well. Oh, and it was posted at all the gas stations and public buildings. So RBC, BMO, CKRZ, post office, the restaurants, the laundromats. And by gas stations, I mean the gas stations that have the connecting convenience stores. Also, my comment about help them was about assisting the elected council as employees in any future meetings they may have with the hereditary chiefs. Also, the presentation is available on paper handouts. We just had a community member today actually receive one. So if you would like the same, you can drop by the office to receive the presentation, or it can be emailed as well. Lonnie, this question is for you. Does Six Nations not have the authority to steal back this land? Does Six Nations not have the authority to steal back this land?
No, we don't have the authority to steal lands back. That's why we're taking the action in the court proceeding. Uh, Now, we're not actually asking for the return of the lands in the court proceeding because that would be a practical and financial impossibility, because when we talk about the Holloman tract, we talk about 1 million acres, almost 1 million acres, and millions of fee simple owners. And in order to property, I suppose, get the land back through any legal action, you'd have to sue all those owners, and it would be a financial and practical impossibility. So the best avenue that we foresaw back when we started a lawsuit was that is to sue the crowns, both Canada, Ontario, who have all the money and control all the money for their wrongful actions of their successor governments in taking our lands, and any money that they did obtain and misappropriating for their own uses. So uh, uh, that's that's the easiest way to do it. Although over the years it's shown it's not as easy as you would think, because there are many impediments to suing the crown, and we've had to meet these challenges since 1995. We've overcome a lot of them, most of them, and those that we weren't able to overcome will be argued in the lawsuit. So it has been a long and arduous process, just in suing the crowns themselves. But we've determined that's the best bet to go. As I said, it would be impossible to sue all the landowners in the Holloman tract. There are just too many of them. So, and you know, uh, getting financial contributions or judgments against the crown and huge amounts of dollars is you know is about as best we can expect, and as fair as a settlement as we can expect to receive. And it would be a lot. So that's the avenue that's been taken since 1995, and finally we're going to get some uh, 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 recompense for all of those years and the loss of the lands. I can see that being the result of the court case. But it still won't be easy, because we still have to run a trial, at least for the first part, which Taylor indicated would take at least 2 years to determine whether the crowns are liable or not. I mean, I think I don't think there's any question that they are, but they're going to fight us all the way. So it's just uh, we just got to hold on a little bit longer and go through this long process. As I said, an arduous process just a little bit longer, and hopefully we'll find our justice at the end of that road.
So we do have to go soon, but I'm just gonna answer two last questions. It says one was like, are those lands 40B or 40? I do believe, Lonnie, 40B is just the glebe lands, correct? And 40 is the rest. Would be the glebe lands, and then 40 would be the current reserve.
Yes, that's correct.
And then there was, who did the developer pay to get it from?
I don't know off top, but I think we previously discussed an agreement with the Mohawk workers and Steve Charest. I assume that would have been one of the parties they would have purchased the land from.
Excellent, thank you. As I said, all comments will be recorded. And if you have any additional questions or after this, please email them to lrcs@sixnations.ca. But we do have to go for the evening, so I wish everyone a pleasant evening. And thank you.